This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar, and it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. And thank you for being with me on this journey. We're going to start with what is energy healing, a short review for the new people. Then we will do our moments of silence, and then we will do the prayer, and then we'll dive into the session, which includes a little review of yesterday. All right, what is energy healing? Energy healing is using attention, which we all have, and we're all very adept at using. And attention is consciousness. And consciousness, attention, folds into its own nature. It folds onto itself. Our bodies are also made of consciousness. So when the body doesn't, our relationships are made of consciousness. So whatever it is that we're putting our attention on, that thing is receiving the benefit of the qualities of consciousness in a very pure form. Because attention is a very pure form of consciousness. It comes with a little bit of intention, right? We give it a little spin sometimes, right? Like I'm putting my attention, like I made lunch before this, and I'm putting my attention on making lunch, and that's where my attention goes. And there's this intention to like successfully navigate my way through the kitchen and get the lunch made. But so they're little specifications for the flow of attention to keep it sort of focused where it needs to be. But overall, the attention in its simplest form is very, very pure, and it brings wholeness wherever it falls. It brings completeness, totality. So the vision of that lunch a vision of the casserole, there is a kind of wholeness, right? The vision of the casserole is a wholeness. So I'm putting my attention on all the parts, and I'm putting them together, and then eventually it's a complete thing. It goes in the oven. We're good. Okay. So, I mean, that's just making lunch. But when it comes to healing the body, it's the same principle. It's the same simple principle that we're used to using all the time for everything. Only we're working at a subtler level, because the seeds of illness and the seeds of suffering and the seeds of problems sit deep, deep inside the being. And so if we want to just cover up the symptoms with a Band-Aid, that's easy. But if we want to really get in and eliminate the cause of the suffering, this requires a flow of attention going into more of an inward direction and locating that spot where the seeds are, and then addressing that seed of imbalance or illness with the attention in such a way as to promote an evolutionary transformation on that initiation of the suffering, that point where the suffering begins. And the change that we're bringing with our attention is just bringing the value of attention itself, which is wholeness. Attention is wholeness, it's completeness, it's resolution and fulfillment. So your beautiful attention is the stuff of which you are made, which ties into today's session because, of course, primary relationship is relationship with the self, and identifying with awareness, consciousness, perception, pure attention. This identification puts us in a position to leverage the potential of the human life. If we identify with something that's more superficial, like identifying with my pain or identifying with my suffering, or even identifying with my achievements or accomplishments in the relative, then this is going to limit the ability to align with the full potential and then bring that full potential to the surface. I mean, it's not, you don't want to pretend that you didn't do what you did. We did what we did. We did do what we do. We have the accomplishments we have, but if we're dwelling on that, then we're not moving on either, right? So we want to stay more in that sense of identifying a sense of self with consciousness. Okay, so that's kind of like an overview of energy healing. It gives us a sort of a universal perspective on how all problems related to health and imbalances and suffering are handled. There's a kind of a universal structure or form, like a template for that. And it involves taking awareness down to the deep levels. Oh, careful how she moves her hands. Taking awareness to the deep levels and then addressing the problem at its source. And the addressing is bringing wholeness. It's reestablishing divine structure and the evolutionary flow. All right, that's what energy healing is. That's one way of saying it. There's so many ways. Now we're going to have 3 minutes of silence. And the reason we do that, those of you who know who are with me for a long time, is that when we close our eyes and we give ourselves a few minutes to direct the attention inward, that's like the foundation of the whole energy healing process. So we're going to start our energy healing today with that. It's so delightful to close the eyes and to dive in, let the awareness allow a moment of turning attention to the source of creation with such reverence and gratitude. I will stop talking, and after 3 minutes, I will say, let's slowly open our eyes, and then we'll come out and do the prayer of gratitude. All right, let's slowly open our eyes. Take a minute. Don't rush. We don't want to jar the system by coming out too quickly. The nervous system settles down a lot in that silence. So we want to honor the depth of the experience by coming out gradually. But it was only 3 minutes, so. I'm just going to have to keep doing that every time it gets fuzzy. Sorry. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Oh. I feel such delightful, buoyant energy in the group today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Here's the prayer of gratitude. Thank you to the source of creation for being us and for being everything. Thank you to our dear family and ancestors and all the people with whom we have relationships for contributing to our reality. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom for connecting the unmanifest field of creation with the manifest, for our ability to work efficiently and concisely. May our webinar today meet and exceed everyone's hopes and desires and wishes and expectations and assumptions for what will happen today. May it be just an absolutely wonderful and useful, valuable, precious time for everyone. Thank you so much. Okay, so I've got all my questions out here. Hope for healing broken relationships. Yesterday, I don't know how many times I have to do that thing to bring back to focus, but hey. So yesterday, we did some healings. We did various healings, and there was a big healing at the end for the relationship between us as individuals and that great, infinite, I am created yet uncreated, existent, and yet non-existent, that deep white, one of the ladies who sent in a question today described it really nicely. And I also remembered David Buckland's lovely words to describe it as well, because let's see if I find it here. Yes, she said, neither existent nor non-existent equals like the white screen behind all the perceptions of the absolute and the relative. Beautifully put. Thank you. And thanks for being with me again today. I remembered now the terms that David Buckland was using too. It's really important, you guys, for us to have terminology to describe the indescribable. It's really important because I realized this morning why. Because we start out by just experiencing reality directly, right? We process our experience in the heart center, and then that experience in the heart center comes up the brain stem. It comes up into like the limbic system. The heart center speaks first to the limbic system, and then it kind of speaks to the other parts of the brain. But the language center is up here in the prefrontal cortex area. So when we find words to describe the things that we're talking about, what we're doing is we're bringing those really abstract, really subtle experiences through to the prefrontal cortex where they integrate. There's a lot of integration that takes place up here, and it allows that experience to connect to other experiences and to sort of lock in with things like our moral compass and our fundamental understandings of reality and things like that. So the reason that it's useful to find those words, and that's why I have a lot of respect for all the people who are working in this field and are creating a lexicon to go along with the range of experiences that are kind of new for people now. I mean, for a lot of people, we're just, you know, this is new territory, like pioneers, like our wagon train, right? We're going into new territory. Of course, deepest respect is given to the ancients who've already been here and they've already named everything. But also a big shout out to those individuals who are reconfiguring that information for the modern age. Because we have different types of situations and challenges and realities that we're dealing with now than people were dealing with 5,000 years ago. So it just is like that. So the point that I'm trying to make is that in that healing at the end of yesterday's session, which I will probably upload because it was quite sweet as a separate, David's point was that I preambled it with that description that I gave last time about the range of the ego from individual ego to cosmic ego. And this would be individual, this would be Brahman or Brahmi Chaitana, right? Brahman consciousness. And then when we zoom outside of ego entirely to the white screen that's behind it, that he uses the word Para-Brahman. Para-Brahman. Yeah, so that's a nice word. Anyway, you can check out David Buckland's blog to read more about his angle and descriptions and perceptions on that. I hope you like that. All right, so yesterday, another point that came up, which I think is really fundamental to relationships, is that we actually all function in a different set of rules. There are different rules for each person. The rules for you are different from the rules for me. Now, of course, each individual person has their own unique set of rules that they set for themselves, right? Like some people have a rule to shower every day, and some people have a rule to shave every day, and some people don't, right? So it's different. It's different for different people. We all have different rules set for ourselves, but also our relationship with divinity is unique. And as consciousness rises, the requirements of the individual change and evolve. And so, you know, some people can get away with violating natural law big time, and other people cannot. And that's just the way it is. So we have to get to know our own set of rules and become sensitive enough to them that when they change a little bit from time to time, depending on the season of the soul, then we are able to make the adjustment right along with them. And this itself is a great resource for dissolving, or there's a word I'm looking for, making less, making less of suffering. Suffering becomes less when we're kind of in tune with the laws, with the way our own divine source is guiding us through our lives. So because of that, we're in relationships with people, and every single person that we have a relationship has their own set of rules and laws that they're following and functioning, within which they're functioning. And so it would be, it makes it a little bit hard because we can't assess another person's experience by the rules that are right for us. We can't. But that's okay. It makes life interesting. Anyway, so we talked a little bit about that and applied that idea to different situations. And I talked a little bit about how relationships, they're kind of like, if we're talking about relationships between people, we talked a little bit about relationships between us and all sorts of layers of creation, but we also talked about relationships between people. And that's what I mostly wanted to focus on for this healing session, by the way, for our webinar. In relationships between people, there are three different options. Either both parties are trying to forge a good relationship, and they're really both working within the constraints of their laws of nature to support the relationship being happy and healthy, or one person is trying to support the relationship and the other person is trying to destroy the relationship, or both of them are trying to destroy the relationship. And I didn't get around to saying last night, but I think it's important to note that it can all possibilities are available here. And it can even happen that two people who are working very hard to support a happy, healthy relationship their relationship can still face challenges. And I would say the core of that is based on this principle that we all have different rules or laws of nature that we have to follow. And the rules and laws for one person are not the rules and laws for another person. So we need to know where boundaries are. And that's probably being clear in expressing your boundaries and being clear on where another person's boundaries are is probably the first rule of relationships. That in itself takes care of an awful lot of problems. If you know what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and you can communicate that in a way that allows the other person to maintain their dignity, and they can do the same for you, then everybody knows where we stand with our friends and relations. And it's pretty easy to position oneself to not offend, to be non-offensive. All right, so that's kind of simple. Now, that's kind of the basics. Those are the basics. But now let's go ahead and look at some of the questions that have been coming in. And if we run out of questions, I have a whole nother area I'd like to open up and look at, or it may come out during the questions. But anyway, I thought it would be nice to start with that. So we're going to start with, I'm going to take them pretty much in order that they arrived. So here's a question from one of our friends in Europe, which is why I'm glad I saved the questions for today, guys. Her question is it possible to speak about healing relationships with those who have already passed on, where we feel there's unfinished business, needing the light of awareness? So when people pass on, they don't have the freedom or flexibility or potential to make a lot of changes here in the relative. So they can't, from their side, like apologize or something like that. They can't, but they can't like at a relative level. So there's certain levels of expectation on the relationship which aren't going to be met. You can't go hug somebody who's not here anymore. Go hug a pile of ashes. Ugh, it doesn't work. So there is that limitation. However, when people pass on, they certainly don't pass beyond the field of consciousness. They do not pass beyond the field of consciousness. And as humans living in human bodies, we own the whole field. We own the complete picture of creation. So the loved ones are still here. They're just not here in the form that they were before. Most people, when they pass out of their bodies after they've gone through their initial stages of transition, just go take a deep, luxurious rest in the source of creation. Kind of like our 3 minutes of silence at the beginning of this session, only like times infinity. So in that place, they're not very accessible with regards to like interactions. They're not so interactive. They're just resting like that. However, there comes a point where the soul has soaked in that silence enough. And the other thing is that in the spirit world, the constraints of space-time do not exist. So say somebody you love that you had unfinished business with left and had to go soak in the silence of the absolute for 100 years or 1,000 years. Then you'd think, well, I'm not going to get access to that person. I will not be able to interact with them. But that's not true, because for them, soaking for 50 years or 1,000 years or whatever is not constrained by our conception of space and time. Therefore, they can do their soak. They can do their soaking in silence as long as they need to. And when they come out, there's still a channel that flows through the heart, because the connection is through the threads of love. There's a connection there. So it's possible to still have some kind of nice interaction. And my experience has been that when people pass out of their bodies and are no longer constrained by the limitations of this world, they become a lot more open-minded and flexible and forgiving and compassionate and easy to communicate with. It's actually easier, but the communication isn't on the level of saying. If you think thoughts like, my mother, fill in the blank, if you think a thought like that, that thought becomes a feature, like a physical feature of their environment. It becomes something in their environment. It becomes a rock in their garden, or a weather condition in their experience of environment, or whatever. Different people go to different places. They see reality, again, different rules for different people, right? They see reality at different degrees of detail, or also concreteness. But if you feel, when your heart brings up one of those lovely kind of spontaneous, sometimes they come up spontaneously, but those sweet impulses of just sensation of the intelligence of the divine coming through you, then that comes in as a direct communication to the people who've passed over to the other side. And they get it. They get it. They understand. We're in a very powerful position in our human bodies to affect changes at multiple levels of reality, much more so than when people pass out of their bodies. So the responsibility is that we have to navigate this field, which allows suffering. Suffering seems to be embedded in it as part of it, illusion, suffering. But we also have the privilege of our consciousness being extremely powerful and being able to manifest at all these levels of density and expression. It's a huge thing. So we absolutely manifest what we manifest. And this even happens if you're not intending, if you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to communicate with my, my parent who passed away or something like that. But you're just doing your thing. You're making lunch and some impulse comes up of a very kind of simple, pure, clear impulse of creative intelligence, which is it doesn't come before it manifests as, say, a casserole. It comes up as just pure intention. And at that level, it absolutely affects all those that we know. And we just came through this period from the 1st of September to the 17th of September. So it ended 2 days ago, where we were very intimately connected with our ancestors, and every little thing that was emanating from our being was touching them. There's kind of like the channels were open. And it's interesting. Did this question come in during that time? Yeah, this question came in on the 12th. So even the impulse to ask this question was born of an interaction with your loved ones and with people who've passed away. It's very beautiful, actually, how that works. That's why it's good to just send love. And if there's unfinished business, you can finish the business. What has to happen is you have to look to what do you need to finish the business? Like what level of resolution is required from your end to feel, okay, then that's complete. When they were alive, they couldn't I felt misunderstood by that person. And so now that they've passed away, I can be kind of simple and clear, and they can understand me. They understand where I'm coming from. They understand why I did the things I did, something like that. And then that feeling of being able to express that allows you to come to a point of resolution in yourself of like, well, at least I know that I was understood. Maybe I was vilified in my lifetime, but now that my loved one is looking from a more broad perspective, from a more subtle perspective, they can understand that I was doing the best I could, something like that. Good question. Okay, here's another question from the same person, because this question came in on the 12th. She's saying she feels like her relationship with herself was broken, and she was unable and unequipped to meet the challenges of the broken relationships with others because of a broken relationship with self. Breaking means not connected to source. Breaking means not connected to source. And we talked about that in more detail yesterday. And also the healing at the end of yesterday's session was specifically for that. Everyone will get that recording today. Hopefully later today or early tomorrow. Broken relationship with source means we go back and examine how we, or self. Broken relationship with self means we go back and examine how do we define self. And as you know, we've talked in previous, and if you missed out on that, although I think you may have been with me for the previous webinars, but you can check a video or that I have up on YouTube on ego, or you can check a page on my knowledge base for ego, because that's where we kind of define that spectrum of self, sense of self. What is sense of self? And when the sense of self dislodges from that idea that I am the witness behind these senses of perception only, and is able to take on the larger perspective of I am the witness behind every, and your nervous system is flexible enough to do this. I am the witness behind every point in creation. And this is very much fundamental to the relationship experience, because when we look, say, at the sun, you look at this, or here I've got the moon, got the moon right behind me. When we look at the moon, oh, I fuzzed myself out. When we look at the moon, the qualities of that great form reflect off of our nervous system. And the nervous system knows the moon. And so it knows reality from the perspective of the moon. This vast universe, this vast multiverse is our whole body. We think, oh, well, no, my awareness only comes through my gross senses of perception, my eyes, my ears, my nose, whatever. No. Awareness comes through every single point in creation, and our nervous systems, our amazing nervous systems with trillions of cells, have the capacity to experience awareness through every point in creation. We actually possess that ability. Sometimes we think of it as empathy, but I think it includes laws of nature that have to do with reflection. And reflection is a really, my camera and I are having a little conversation right now. Sorry. Oh, look at that. My camera is reflecting me, and it's like, it's illustrating. The camera is the illustrator here. Thank you, camera, for helping me show everybody, for illustrating through action how the camera is not Dorothy, but the camera reflects the image of the physiology that is Dorothy's vehicle. What am I? I am the consciousness that constructs literally every point of my reality. Whatever I experience is the byproduct of the flow of consciousness. So my consciousness. So yeah, the camera is part of that story. And it reflects, but it reflects through the context of its laws of nature. We do this for each other. As energy healers, those of you out there who are working on becoming the best energy healer you can become, your nervous system, our nervous systems have the ability to reflect the experience of other people without, like the camera, without becoming it. So somebody's suffering, they have some illness that you don't want to have their illness, but you can reflect the experience off of your own nervous system in such a way that you understand their experience without becoming the experience. There's a part, you could say You could say the shiny reflective surface of your consciousness becomes the experience. You could say that, but it's only a part of you because you are infinite being. So we reflect. We reflect. I hope that helps. It was a really abstract answer, I know. Okay. I'm just checking if we want to do some energy healing to support everyone's ability to reflect the experience of others in a way that gives you the most useful information from that reflection without gripping your sense of self, without dragging who you think you are or feel that you are into their suffering. Feels like activation for the heart. Starts with activation for the heart. Heart center is where we understand our experience. There is a sequence of impulses of intelligence that slow down. So imagine like if you were listening to pitches or tones, right? From a higher note to a lower note to a lower note. There's a series of pitches that organize themselves in a hierarchy, which act as stepping stones for the heart's wisdom to navigate its way, navigate heart wisdom into the deepest levels of self or of consciousness. Because whatever the suffering is, it's an affliction at the surface of creation. And when the heart, so I'm just saying to you, this is the download that's coming in for everybody, is access to this series of codes. You could think of them as codes or pitches, but they're frequencies of consciousness that are like little stepping stones that you can step down to a quieter, like that, to quieter levels. And this sequence of pitches is, or codes, is being received by the heart as the most efficient and universal method for finding that particular point that is beyond the suffering, beyond the suffering. So the suffering is like a symptom that occurs from lack of connection to source. And the symptom is at the surface somewhere. And the symptom it can only exist in an environment, in a level of reality that is riddled with diversity, is riddled with differences, is fragmented. We could say fragmented. The source of creation fragments as it comes to the surface, right? And so suffering can only reside in a fragmented state where one is seeing only part of the picture, because when wholeness is reestablished, also the suffering, the experience of suffering reaches resolution or completion or conclusion. So the stepping down means you don't have to step all the way down to the source of creation necessarily. You just need to step down far enough that you're at a deeper, the heart's wisdom is humming at a deeper level than the symptom of the suffering. That's all. So it's efficient. This is a very, very efficient way to address or handle difficulties, challenges, pain, discomfort, whether emotional or physical. There's an area of consciousness which is deeper. And it's like the reason this download is so easy to access and use is the pitches are like a song. It's like a song. It's like hearing a chord. You know, chords are built up in layers. And the whole chord has a flavor For those musicians in my group, the whole chord has a flavor. Every chord has a flavor. And so the flavor of this particular chord is specific for healing and for navigating to a subtler level than the suffering. Navigating to a subtler level than the suffering. At the subtler level, compassion and forgiveness and resources required to shine an appropriate light on that suffering so that it can heal most effectively. And you can say, well, isn't the source of creation where we get all those values? Yes, we do. But this is going to tie into the next question. It's very important that the healing is administered from a level that is accessible to the individual who is suffering. We have to speak to the level of consciousness of whoever we're working with, including ourselves. So that's why it's good to have this pattern of frequencies of consciousness that help just bring us in the most efficient manner to that level that's deeper than the suffering, whatever that is. So if the suffering is here, it brings us down to here. And if the suffering is here, it brings us down to here, like that. And if the suffering is sitting right at the door of unmanifest being, then into source we go. May that always serve you. May you find it like a beautiful song in your heart that supports your ability to find the most optimal point for supporting your loved ones and yourself ever in times that are more challenging. Okay, this ties right into the next really awesome question. And this is a really interesting situation. You know, relationships are not simple, right? They're complicated. If they were simple, we wouldn't be here working them out. They're relationships, and that's another point that came up from yesterday, which is fundamental to relationships, which is working out relationships is probably the most efficient way to evolve as humans in our world and in our relationships. I mean, in our environment. And that includes, I was saying that because I was thinking also of our relationship with nature. And we're going to be doing a webinar on relationship with nature coming up soon enough, hopefully, I think end of October. And it's complex. It's a complex topic. And relationships are designed to stretch us. Anyway, so here's this question. The more tender I am with one of my brothers, the more ferocious he is to me these days. Could it be that the great flow of love for me is making him uncomfortable or purify? Maybe he needs to put me at a distance in his desperate attempt to stop the flow of that purification and feel normal in himself. You see, it's complicated. First of all, the person who wrote this question, this beautiful question, is one of the tenderest, gentlest souls I know. She's absolutely got a beautiful, soft heart. And she's extremely spiritual. And she has extremely beautiful experiences. Like, this is a person whose consciousness is at a very high level, right? We're talking someone who's very in tune with natural law and wise and profound. So naturally, flow of tenderness is going to embrace or sort of gather up all of that profound field of consciousness. I would say it's very likely, if the brother is not at that same level, that not only something sweet that you say to him, but your very presence on this earth could have a purifying effect on him. So the answer is to meet him a little bit more at his level. And I mean, obviously, if he's being ferociously cruel to you, you don't want to be ferociously cruel back, obviously. But you can do this thing where you see where he's at, and you come just a little step below it, rather than making your presentation from that level of infinite love, which, you know, for someone who's not ready to handle that, that can be overwhelming, right? But instead of it coming from the level of infinite love, it can come from a level subtle below, just a little step in the direction that his soul is moving, just so that it's like a baby step for him to make that little transition. Sometimes people who leverage their anger see tenderness as a form of vulnerability or weakness. So if you're tender with him and he sees that, he interprets that as weakness in you, he will respond to it as weakness, as a kind of a weakness that he has to counteract. And in so doing, he is redefining your gift to him. You're giving him a gift of purity and sweetness from your heart, and he's redefining it as something which he finds personally unsavory somehow, right? Because he doesn't want his sister to be weak. He doesn't want her to be vulnerable. He doesn't want her to be so tender that she could be exploited. So he smacks on that thing in order to say, oh, there's something there that doesn't look strong to me. I mean, this is based on the fact that we all are following different rules, right? Different rules for behavior and different laws of nature, but in the same stroke, if you place yourself just a level, just a little more of empathy, right? Just a little bit deeper than where his negativity is residing, then your love can come forward in a form that he is able to respect. It could take a while before his consciousness evolves enough to be able to receive the full power of your tender love in its purest form. Thank you for this beautiful question. Okay, so I think I'll do one more question that came in from yesterday, and then we'll go. I see there's like 12 questions that have come in here too, so we'll take care of everything. Yes, all right. So how does the front of the chakras experiencing relate to the back of the chakras doing something about it? Have lots of insight. Oh, she has lots of insights and plans, or this person, anonymous, has lots of insights and plans, but no idea of how to manifest in the physical. It just doesn't happen, or peters out after 5 minutes. First of all, the timing of this question is really auspicious, because we are literally in a time right now for like the next month where nature isn't really very supportive of carrying through to the surface plans. It is very supportive of diving deep within and resetting the entire fundamental structure that underlies the way we manifest. So think of doing at this time as internal doing, at least for the next month or so. And of course, if there's an idea or plan and we make some attempt to bring it forward and it meets with resistance and is unsuccessful, then that is a pretty clear indication from the creation that that plan has to go back to the drawing board and get a little bit more solid internal structure to support its emergence into the surface of life. What that does is it turns our desires into vehicles for evolution, right? The desire to do something great ends up being the fuel for taking an inward dive of awareness and uncovering or revealing finer mechanics of the manifesting process, so that when your energy and your resources, your investment comes out to the surface, it's coming out on this wave. It's being carried by a wave of support that's not just support from you personally, but it comes from through the entire environment. And this is really, in a way, I think it's more of a manifesting question. But if we were going to tie it back to the field of relationships, we each have our own personal ideals and wishes for the well-being of, we each see the relationships in our world in their like ideal form, in their own special way. So if my ideal vision of my relationship with somebody differs drastically from their ideal vision of the relationship, then even if we're both committed, and I mentioned before that this can happen, that in a mutually committed situation where both people really want the relationship to work, but it still doesn't work, this is usually the reason, is that the two visions don't align very well. So one person's working for the well-being of the relationship, but through a channel that goes this way, and the other person's working for the well-being of the relationship in a channel that goes that way. And as they work, they just keep getting further apart rather than closer together. And when that happens, the secret is to get down underneath those ideals and those visions and those expectations, you could say, expectations for the relationship, to get to a level, the deeper levels of consciousness are more unified. So we get down to the deeper levels of the experience of the relationship in order to find common ground with the person we love. And I think I'd like to just take a moment, because this is, guys, this is kind of low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, if you have people in your world who really actually love you, who really actually want to have a nice relationship with you, and you really actually want to have a nice relationship with them, but for some reason it's just not jiving, then the healing for that is not so complicated. So we'll just take a moment and put some attention there. This is in the mental body, clearing judgments and expectations and assumptions, clearing illusion that causes us to sort of superimpose the rules that we live by onto the behaviors and the reality of people that we love, that we're in relationships with. There's a clearing taking place of illusion, and it's clearing from these two spots here, deep, deep in the chest area, like not on the surface, but you could say between the front and back of the chakras, but at the 4.5 chakra level on both sides like that. And this clearing of illusion is also going through the meridians. It's traveling from these, there's 2 points of significant points, energy points there, that goes through to the head area, to the limbic system. And then from the limbic system, it curls back and it talks to the heart. Well, that's so interesting. So we've kind of got a sort of a loop taking place, because from the heart, of course, the heart's like a major energy center for the body. So the heart energy center right here in the middle of the chest. So then that talks back, it talks to those 2 points in the shoulders. Now, the points in the shoulders are, as far as my vision goes, so I can understand and see them, these are seed locations for manifesting desire. These are seed locations because the desire starts deep in the center, but then the arms and hands and also the throat and vocal mechanism are all players in the way we bring our intentions out to the surface. And so these two nodes are where the seeds of desire, you could say where the rubber meets the road, as far as the seeds of desire engaging in that no turning back point between it being a seed of desire and it actually sprouting, and like it sprouts. This is where the seed sprouts, is in these two, like the sprouting of wings, right? It's very much an etheric form, very etheric forms. You can check my video on the etheric body for more information on how that forms up. What's happening at these two spots is also the establishment of 112-point matrix in both of these two spots. And that 112-point matrix supports a direct connection to the source of creation. We can transcend. For those of you who use that transcending word, we can practice transcending meditation. It's like we can, all of us with our whole being, we can transcend, but a part of the body can also transcend. It's like, oh, it's like if you hear such beautiful music, right? And your ears, you transcend through the auditory cortex, or you eat some food that's just transcendentally delicious and you transcend in the mouth, right? So this is like transcending at the point where the seeds of desire begin to sprout. Because it's a loop that's going up into the limbic system and then back to the heart and then out and then up and back and out and like that. All the parts are purifying. The emotional body is purifying. Such purity, such emotional purity. It's beautiful. And it's that purification of the emotional body that forms the seeds of desire in the first place. So thank you, everybody, for sitting with me through that. Sometimes when I check into my body elemental, it seems to be the body elemental itself seems to be in a very short loop of repetitious behavior. Is that normal? And how can I give it more freedom of expression? So this is relationship. This is a relationship inside the self. It is common for souls who are on a very profound and fast-paced evolutionary path to sort of outgrow their body elemental. The body elemental joins us when the body is born and when it's forming. But when the body is created, the body elemental joins us. But on a very profound spiritual path, the body elemental might need some upgrades or support. And so I'm thinking, because I'm also looking at our time and the number of questions. I've already published some free information on this. So I think I'd like to direct everyone to watch a video. I have a video on healing for the body elemental that supports an upgrade for that. And there's, of course, also a knowledge base page for the body elemental that includes, I believe it includes a healing that activates as you read it, as well as all the videos that I have on the topic of the body elemental, including healings for it. So I think that's probably a really good place. You can get all that information directly and freely. But if there's still questions, by all means, email me back. Yes, of course. I love sharing as much information as I can with y'all cute people. You all adorable people. All right, let's go to another question. Okay, this person says, working with a team with my husband and repair relationships with my son, grandchildren, and daughter-in-law. You are not the only one. Another person also wrote in, and she's not able to be in a relationship with her son and daughter-in-law and grandson at this time. So it's very delicate. very delicate situation. Most of you know that I spent time in Northern Australia with the Yuryorant people, who are native original people in Australia, and they have the first people of Australia have very, very complex kinship systems. And within these systems, there are pretty highly defined codes of conduct that include the mother-in-law doesn't really interact that much with, with her children-in-law. And it's interesting when you find that code of conduct in a group of people who evolved over centuries in isolation, right? Before the Westerners even came to Australia, that was a thing. That was actually a thing back then. Still is today. But I also have adult children. The mother can't, I don't think, when we're talking about rules for behavior, I don't know if the mother can ever really rest on her laurels. You know, we know that raising little children is a darn lot of work. It just is, man. It's a lot. It takes dedication and devotion and love and strength, physical strength and patience, and you name it. But it doesn't guarantee the mother to necessarily be accepted or embraced when the children become adults. It doesn't. So there's some little element there that the role of mother continues to evolve. So by the time she has adult children, she no longer has to dress them and feed them and drive them here and there and etc. You know, they're doing that part. So the mother's patience, you could say, is tried in a different way. It evolves. The mother's skill, the dharma of mother evolves into a very, very different form. And I think of all the relationships that I know of, this one of going from being a little child to being a young girl, to being an adolescent, to being, you know, a teenage beauty, you know, and then to being a wife, and then to being a mother, and then to being all these phases that motherhood brings. It's one of the most diverse roles that a person plays in their lifetime. It's really tremendous. I mean, when you think of the change that occurs just at the time the baby is born, one goes from being a young maiden to being a mother. And like, that's just huge. It's huge. It's so huge. We hardly even talk about it in our society because it is so transformative. And then it doesn't stop. Then the work starts. That's what, then you get to work, man. So, you know, it is a role that requires tremendous flexibility, tremendous adaptability, and tremendous stability. It's a good example of a relationship where, at least as a general rule, the parties really, really want to maintain, or they want to see that relationship grow. No doubt, no doubt, your children want to have a nice relationship with you, no doubt. And grandchildren, you know, grandchildren feel kind of like shortchanged if the grandmother isn't allowed to be around and they're not allowed to have that level of interaction with the grandmother, who's adoring, right? Adoring down to their bones. She adores them completely. So what's happening right now is, for all the people, all the adults who are at that level with children and grandchildren, is support Again, this is heart supports. Kind of, I feel like the core of the healing is sort of starting out in the heart area here. But it definitely is an integration of some of the work we've already done today. And part of it was on that series of steps of codes that help you get to that level where you can provide the input into the relationship, and you can provide the input that the person that you love needs or can best receive from you without overwhelming the system, without threatening the laws that they're living by. And I think part of this part of the healing session now includes an upgraded sensitivity to the laws that other people live by. So we understand our own laws, but we have to be able to understand other people's laws too. And they can vary hugely, right? Just hugely. Cultural traditions, various others. There's a particular type of intelligence, right? Okay, good. So for instance, there's like common sense, and there's like sort of social intelligence, and there's that kind of logical, mathematical intelligence, and there's musical intelligence, and there's physical intelligence, right? They're all different flavors or types of intelligence. There is an intelligence specific to, we could call it empathy, but I think it takes, the word empathy needs to be taken to another level. It's a type of intelligence that allows you to empathically and intuitively recognize the boundaries and limitations in which other people are residing. And what's really, really interesting about this healing and this download that everyone is receiving is that a lot of people don't even know. A lot of people live by certain codes and behaviors and rules and so forth, but they haven't even defined for themselves exactly what those rules are. They're just kind of going along. They're kind of in the flow, you know, they're just doing the best like that. So this healing for the heart's intelligence, and then it has to go up and up into the prefrontal cortex area where we analyze and synthesize and understand and can verbalize what we're experiencing. Connecting heart and mind. But more importantly, that particular type of intelligence, like the other types of intelligence, physical intelligence, mathematical intelligence, etc., it has, you have a relationship with that intelligence. So this I talked a lot more about yesterday. We have relationships with people, but we also have relationships with subtle structures of creation. And that causal level of creation is good to get to know the causal level of your own physiology, because there are the expressions of intelligence. And the intelligence that has that tremendous capacity to look through the eyes of another person and to understand things about them that they don't even understand themselves, or at least they've never spoken to themselves. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful gift. I would suggest everyone to use it with caution. Because if a person is functioning within the constraints of limitations self-imposed, some of them, or if we say connected to their own divine being, self-imposed limitations, but they are not at a place where they can even express that to themselves, expressing it to them could blow them out of the waters. So what we do is we see it, we honor it, and we drop back into the source of creation with it. That's what we do. That's the healing algorithm. You can check out my knowledge base page on the healing algorithm and my video on the healing algorithm. See it, honor it, hide in the self. Because it's powerful. This is powerful. This is a very powerful download. To be able to see that intimately into another person, it requires such purity, right? Such purity of heart, and like no judgment and no. So that's the biggest part of this healing, is that realignment of the heart. And that realignment of the heart isn't just happening for each person. It is happening for each person in this healing session, but it's also happening for 7 to 8 layers of ancestors as well, because it's a very big step. It's a very big step to see so deeply into the soul of another person. And it requires each stroke of awareness being utterly and totally uplifting in every conceivable way. Absolutely evolutionary. And you know, you're more powerful. Your silence is more powerful than even speaking. Silence is powerful. The silent flow of awareness is extremely powerful. It's transforming. It's transforming. I feel like everyone's being blessed. And I also feel as if this healing is somehow touching the gut mahamarma area as well. And it's somehow purifying or supporting our physiologies, these physiologies, and the ancestors, 7 to 8 generations, purifying and releasing a lot of like judgments and expectations and so forth that are connected in with sexuality. I wasn't expecting that, but congratulations, everyone, for being a living embodiment of a balanced condition of expression that hums in this realm of creation with answers that people are looking for. That's what you're doing. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I promised a few more minutes because we started just a few minutes late because I was chatting with you. So let's go to the questions up here. Okay, so one lady talked about Parabrahman as feels like nothingness and fullness together. Fullness of emptiness, or nothingness yet fullness. Beautiful. That's a beautiful way to describe it. Thank you. Thank you from California, where I hear the skies are clearing. God bless. Here's another person. The mind has to go beyond what it knows to experience the divine. That's right. It's a universal experience tailored to the personal. Oh, beautifully put. And then shared sideways with another person. Oh yes, hard to keep the truth of the universal in this translation from one to another. So beautifully put, so beautifully put. Because when it goes beyond the level of experience, the mind goes beyond the mind, because the mind is, of course, it's the vehicle on which we formulate our expressions, right? So when it has to come back up through the mind, which is experiencing, then it has to go through that filter of experience to be expressed. And it can be very tricky, but oh, I love the way you said that. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely beautiful. A lady is saying this is also spoken, I think we're talking about Parabrahman. It's also spoken of in Lincoln in the Bardo, which is a novel that is very beautiful. Beautiful. I didn't know. Lincoln in the Bardo, everybody. You can look it up if you love novels. Hi, Dorothy. How is stepping down? Oh, this is the lady who asked the question about her brother. So there's somebody commenting and asking about that. How is her stepping down to her brother's level staying in integrity with the self? And how can we do that with family and stay in self-integrity? Okay, good question. So I'm not suggesting that she puts herself on the same level as her brother. I'm suggesting that she positions herself at a deeper level than his stress. So his stress is like a symptom that's at the surface of reality, and she's got to get down underneath that with her awareness, but not too far. Like I think that was the point that I was trying to make there, is that we want to get down to a level that's below the symptom, far enough below the symptom that whatever expression of intelligence comes forth is for that person who's suffering, for that person who's angry or being cruel or whatever, is just a very, very small baby step for them to move into a place of higher integrity themselves, but not so far into the source of creation that the expression that comes forward to the person who's being negative, it's not so far in that when the expression comes out, they can't even relate to it. Does that make sense? Does that help? That the idea is you want to get yourself positioned into a point that's sort of like between your level, the absolute level, and their suffering, so that what you're doing is you're offering them like a bridge. Basically, you're offering them something that's small, that they can handle, that they can relate to, but that is not corrupting your behavior by putting you into their negativity or putting you on the same level as them. One of my children give me wise things a lot of times, and was saying that in social interactions, and this is very superficial, but it really was interesting, that in social interactions, if somebody loses it and explodes on you or unloads on you, all you have to do to come out of that situation clean is just don't explode on them. Like basically whatever you say, whatever you do, if you don't lower yourself to their level of explosion, you come out, and I think I was talking about this yesterday too, kind of related to like situations at work that people might find themselves in, that ultimately in a situation like that, what we're doing is we're supporting the entire social construct that's around that experience. We're supporting the whole collective to rise up a notch. And we do that by offering a perspective that is subtler than the one that's being given, but just subtle enough, not too much, so it's efficient, right? Just subtle enough that it allows everyone to step into the next state of grace. I hope that helps. Thank you. Okay. How do you find forgiveness in broken relationships? Knowing that the other person is constrained by their own rules and regulations helps. Because if we judge the other person's behavior based on our own rules and regulations, and remember, as your consciousness rises, in some ways you have fewer freedoms, but in a lot of ways you have way more freedoms. So sometimes the other person is constrained by their own weaknesses and limitations. They literally can't act maturely. They can't be mature. They can't be kind. They don't have it in them. And so the forgiveness comes partly in understanding that they are constrained. The other side of it comes from giving yourself the freedom to do what you need to do in order to self-protect. Because as long as you feel gripped into like their vision of what the relationship is supposed to be like and who you're supposed to be for them, you are always going to feel resentful, because you know that their vision of the relationship and who you're supposed to be for them limits you, and it does not honor your consciousness. But when you give yourself permission to bring your full potential to the surface, and that means sometimes the freedom to not concede to another person's expectations, which are designed to trap you into their pain, right? You have the freedom. You have the freedom. And sometimes people, yeah, sometimes people will leverage cultural conditioning to make you feel guilty or make you feel like you should, you should be coming up to their expectation for some reason. And like, that's what an enlightened person would do. An enlightened person would just like, you know, go about the earth like Jesus. I sometimes have people say to me, well, why don't you just travel around the earth, and just freely healing everybody who comes into your sight? And it's like, well, that's a lovely idea, but I also have a daughter in college, I also have a mortgage, I mean, it's just like, it's a lovely idea. And perhaps at some point, when the manifesting is at the point where there are no needs, I don't need to eat or sleep anymore, I can totally do that. But right now, I need a place to lay down at night and sleep. So it just is. It just is. But you know what I'm saying? That like people will say, well, if you were more enlightened, you would whatever. And the thing is that it's not, no human being on this earth is in charge of defining for you what your enlightenment is. Nobody. So only you. That's between you and the divine. And when that relationship is straightened out, it's easier to forgive people. It's easier to let them be at their level of consciousness and to do them. Some beautiful comments are coming in, but they're not questions. And we're looking for the questions. Okay, that's good. There was just one. I think I got all the questions saved for one. I think there's one I missed. There's this really, really cool comment about dukkam, which is the Sanskrit word for suffering. Was original, and I did not know this. So I want to share this with you guys because I think it's way cool. And that is that this term was originally used by makers of wooden wheels to identify a wheel that had its axis off center. Such a wheel goes kerthump, kerthump with every turn and makes a bumpy, miserable ride even on a smooth road. This seems to fit the answer that I was giving about how to move forward without suffering on our evolutionary journey, that when we keep our life centered on the point of existence, that silent, omnipresent, directional center, the source of all, then our ride is smooth and free of dukkam. Beautiful. We're established in evenness, wholeness of life. Okay, I'm still looking for that other question. There was a lady who had something with her husband. Well, that's odd. I'm not seeing it. Well, okay, so maybe I answered all the questions. One more cruise through last night's points just to make sure. Oh, here they are. Okay, so I'm not finding it. All right, so not that question. Anyway, we went plenty over our time today. Thank you everyone for being with me. As always, you guys are so sweet. Absolutely precious to me. And this time is absolutely precious. And may everyone's relationships arise, may they rise, and may we as a collective work together coherently as a team to navigate our way through the current collective challenges that our world is facing. The reason the challenges come up as collective events is because we are expected to work on them together as a collective. So I'm always deeply grateful for our webinars because it gives us a chance to do that. Together we work together, and the solutions that come forward, like the healings that came forward today, these are the ones that our world needs right now. So may they expand and touch every heart in our world. And may we find the very best way to rise out of this time of inner restructuring, the silence, to successful behavior on the surface that supports everyone's evolution and every being on this earth and our beautiful earth itself, and evolution for all. Thank you so much for being with me. Thank you for all the cute and sweet comments. Bye.